All right, hello YouTube. Yes, I know I've been MIA for pretty much a week now. I I do apologize for that. I was waiting for something, I was waiting for something big to report on, and I finally have something. Um, I do have two videos planned that I'm gonna do at some point. I will most probably end up doing one of them tomorrow, and then the other one either um, end up doing the other one. If not tomorrow, then definitely at some point this week. Um, but I want to bring to your attention. So Marvel and Disney just did a 5 hour stream revealing the entire cast of Avengers Doomsday. Um and I want to talk about just like the giant clusterfuck this cast is and just why it doesn't make any sense at all. So um I'm going to read to you guys the complete list here. Uh so we have Chris Hemsworth as Thor, Vanessa Kirby as Invisible Woman, Anthony Mackie obviously as Captain America, um, Sebastian Stan as the Winter Soldier, Letitia Wright as Black Panther, Paul Rudd as Ant Man, Wyatt Russell as U.S. Agent. Um, I'm not going to even try to pronouncing. I'm not going to even try pronouncing this actor's name because I know I'm just going to butcher it. But whoever played Namor in Wakanda Forever, um, uh, Eba, Ebon Moss Backrich as the Thing. I know I probably butchered that as well. Um, uh, 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 Simi Liu as Shang-Chi, Florence Pugh as Black Widow, Kelsey Grammer as Beast, Louis Perlman as Sentry, Danny Ramirez as Falcon, Joseph Quinn as the Human Torch, excuse me, David Harbour as Red Guardian, Winston Duke as M'Baku, um, Hannah John Kamen as Ghost, Tom Hiddleston as Loki, Patrick Stewart as Professor X, Ian McKellen as Magneto, Alan Cumming as Nightcrawler, Rebecca Romaine as Mystique, James Marsden as Cyclops, Channing Tatum as Gambit, Pedro Pascal as Mr. Fantastic, and obviously Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom. Now, I mean, I I mean, do I even need to explain why this doesn't make any sense? I mean, if you look at, look at Infinity War and Endgame, right? One of the, I mean, there were obviously many, 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 many reasons to be, why people were so excited for those movies. But, one of them obviously was, everybody, after each character's and or yeah, after each character's movie at the time, one of the reasons why, one of the many reasons why, there was so much hype, for those two movies is it was the first time that these all characters, were going to come together and, and cross over with one another. Like you had, um, a lot of first time, everybody, pretty much, was meeting, the other for the first time, and it all made sense. This, you know, and I probably should have mentioned this. I probably should have mentioned this before. Anybody whose name that I did not just read off that list is not in the movie. Um, so you have, so like Tom Holland's not going to be in it. Wesley Snipes is not going to be in it. Ryan Reynolds is not going to be in it. Hugh Jackman is not going to be in it. One of the ones that would obviously, make the most sense. Um, 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 Daphne Keene's not going to be in it, but I mean, this goes under my favorite category of, this guy, all of this, all the, all this stuff, it goes under, it literally proves what I've been saying, for the past 5 years now, that Marvel, has been in the toilet now for the past 5 years, outside of, outside of, a few successes here and there, Deadpool and Wolverine, Spider-Man No Way Home, uh, Guardians 3, and Daredevil, and Daredevil Born Again, which sadly is failing, uh, viewership wise, because of obviously, because of how obviously, because of how much damage Marvel and Disney have done to the brand, and two, obviously, all the bridges that they've burned over the years. Um, but but take a look at this cast as a whole. Like, you literally have almost half the cast of you know the original the original X-Men coming back, and outside of outside of you know uh Patrick Stewart being in, who came back for Multiverse of Madness, you have none, everybody was, like, when X-Men Days of Future Past came out, right? Everybody was pretty much under the impression that that was the last time that you were going to see those actors in those roles, right? Because obviously at this point, they're, because obviously at this point, they pretty much all, aged out, which happens with, which obviously happens with, actors and roles. Um, and, so doing something like this, it just, literally completely contradicts, um, that, impression, that people had. And, and it's like, here, it's like, I can see it now, Marvel and Disney just probably went, okay, well, we don't have, Spider-Man anymore. For whatever reason, they chose not to bring, Doctor Strange back, one of the, again, another one of the characters that, excuse me, sorry, that, that would have made, perfect sense to bring back. Um, and it's just, this entire thing, goes under, my favorite category of, of just, throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. And that is pretty much all that Marvel and Disney have been doing now for the past 5 years with this franchise. That's, they don't, they literally have no fucking clue what they're doing. And it shows here. It really, really does. Because, I mean, I mean, how the hell do you bring back, you know, um, how the hell do you bring back, members of the X-Men, but don't bring back Wolverine? It just, it's like having an Avengers, uh, it, it's like having an Avenger, it would be like, having an Avengers movie without, Captain America or Thor. And I, and like, I knew that, and I knew that this movie wasn't, like, like, I was not, like, when Robert Downey was announced as, Doctor Doom at, during that, San Diego reveal, I was not one of those people who was happy to see him back. I was not one of those people that, that went, oh my God, Robert Downey is back in the MCU. No, 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 no. You don't you don't bring, you don't give, you know, it would be, like, it would be one thing if he was a side character in one of these movies and then they killed him off and they brought him back. That would have been fine. But you and I both know that's obviously not the case. The entire friggin' franchise was built around Iron Man. And and you don't bring, you don't you don't just build, this entire franchise around this character for 10 years, have the, give him, literally the best friggin' story arc in comic book history, have him, have the audience, fall in love with this character for 10 years, then, then kill him off and bring him back as someone else, be, because your franchise has been in the toilet for the past 5 years. And it's just, it's such a creatively bankrupt and desperate thing to do. And and I remember actually seeing, when this was first announced, even the Hollywood Reporter um called them out, called them out on this, and and totally, and and even, even they, were able to admit, yeah, this is a very, very desperate, uh move. And it is, and because there's no, um because there's no, um there's just, there's no reason for it. There's no reason for it at all. Again, they did it because they're desperate. And and I'm not gonna, and look, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna sit here and, and try to pretend, that I understand, all the bullshit that they've been, and just, I'm not going to sit here and, and try to make sense of, of all the bullshit that they've been, uh that they've been doing, for the past 5 years, because that would be, that would be a waste of your time and mine. Uh but it's just, like, you don't have any major, um you don't have, like, any major, like, A characters in here. Captain America Brave New World sucked and was, and was a flop. Um, I mean, Thor is really the only one, um, in terms of, characters who have been here since Marvel Phase 1, Chris Hemsworth is the only one. I mean, and again, you're trying to, you're trying to get, um this is literally nothing more than, than Marvel and Disney, doing damage control. I mean, it's just, again, it's such a creatively bankrupt, thing to do. I mean, and like maybe, if they had brought back, um, I did hear a rumor um, that I did hear a rumor that supposedly Tobey Maguire and Hugh Jackman are going to return for um, Secret Wars, because that would be freaking incredible. Excuse me, sorry if that was true. But another thing that is really killing this franchise, and that is really killing this franchise, is comic book movie fatigue. People are sick and tired of these movies. There are too many superhero projects coming out every year, and and people, like for people like myself, like it's not, like unless it's something very, very special, unless you have something truly, very, very special, and people are not gonna get excited, about these movies. They aren't, like if you did, uh, like for example, like if you did, like a Spider-Man and Daredevil movie, Tom Holland Spider-Man and Charlie Cox's Daredevil, that would be a friggin' tank at the box office. That would I that would that would be, I mean, you would have everybody and their mother running to the theater to see that. But but that's not, um but that's not what they're doing nowadays. Nowadays, again, they're throwing stuff in the wall and they're seeing what sticks. And there's no plan, um there's no rational thought process, there's no just yep. I can see it now, like I can, um like I can see it now. Like they probably, like Marvel and Disney just probably went, "Oh, okay. Well, we don't have this actor anymore. We don't have that actor anymore. We don't have that actor anymore. So what can we do? Oh, I know. We'll bring this person back. We'll bring this person back. We'll bring, this person back. This, and this, and we'll, and we'll just throw it all in here, and and just hope it makes money." It's like, I mean, seriously. I mean, it's like, it's just, who comes up with this shit? You know, I mean, it's like appealing to the fans is not rocket science. It's like, if you please, if you're able, to please the fans, to please the general audience, boom, money made. I mean, if you're able, to please the fans and to please the general audience, money is made. you know Money is made. Uh, everybody involved goes home, with money in their pockets, and and the general audience, and and the general audience and fans like myself go home happy. Everybody's happy, everybody wins. But no, we can't do that. But no, we can't do that. But no, we can't do that because that's too fucking difficult. I mean, you know, I I mean, I just it's ju- and I mean, like they very, very easily could have cast somebody else as Doctor Doom. They did not have to bring back um Robert Downey Jr. Me personally, I don't even understand why, he agreed to come back at all. I mean, he won an Oscar for Oppenheimer. It's like, I mean, he won, he won an Oscar for Oppenheimer. He has nothing to prove. He's got nothing to prove by returning to Marvel. Nothing. And which makes me question, why did he even agree to this? I mean, Marvel and Disney literally paid him like a small fortune to come back. I mean, excuse me, sorry. Plus, plus literally his own private jet in a fucking trailer park. I mean, it's I mean, I just, this is the stuff that pisses me off more than anything. These are, stuff like this is why I can't get excited about these movies anymore. You know, because mm, because you have people, who have no fucking clue what they're doing. They don't give a shit about the fans, and they just and they just want to throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. You know, and I just DC and like I've been uh like so many franchises right now are in the toilet. You know, y- Marvel's in the toilet. DC is in the toilet. Star Wars is in the toilet. The 007 franchise is now in the toilet thanks to Amazon. I mean, I just I don't get it. I mean, and like you very easily could have brought you very easily could have had Mads Mikkelsen as Doctor Doom. He would have made a friggin' great Doctor Doom. And I think a lot of people, myself included, would have been thrilled, you know, t- to to see him play, like a main, like a big baddie in the MCU. Because obviously he only played, he only played the main bad guy in the first Doctor Strange movie. So bringing casting him as Doctor Doom, definitely would have made more sense. He wasn't uh one of the big, main characters of the MCU. The MCU obviously wasn't built around his character, so they very easily could have casted him and it would have worked. Um, and people, people like myself would have absolutely been thrilled about, and from what I understand, that was originally the case. He was originally going to be Doctor Doom. They should have went with that. But, but it's like, I don't fucking care about, Red Guardian, meeting, uh, crossing over with, like the Fantastic Four, or, the X-Men or whatever. It's like, I don't fucking care. I mean, it's like, why? Why should I care? Why is this even happening? I and having the X-Men, meet, the Fantastic Four. It's like, without Wolverine, I don't care. It's just, why even bring the X-Men in, or why even why even have the X-Men in there at all without Wolverine? It doesn't make any fucking sense. I mean, none of this makes sense. I mean, why, I, you have, I mean, it's not going to have the same, like, like right now there's no, and this is something that they just literally did out of nowhere. They just literally did a 5-hour stream announcing, the entire cast and crew of the movie. Let me remind you guys, Marvel has never done anything like this in any of their previous movies. So the fact that they took time, out of their day, to pull this shit, I think, I think should really, really tell you how desperate they are. I mean, again, they've never done this with any of their, with any of their previous movies. And, and, and I, and I'm just, and, and, and let me remind you guys, I you know, I mainly left Marvel after, Endgame. I mean, obviously, I came back for Spider-Man. I came back for, uh, Deadpool and Wolverine. Um, Guardians 3 was successful. However, I did not like, uh, Volume 2, so I didn't bother with Volume 3. But, but none of these, a lot of these characters, people are just going to be like, why? Why? Um, and, in bringing back, a lot of these, you know, uh, a lot of these original actors, who haven't done, obviously, who haven't, done that role, obviously, since Days of Future Past. It's like, well, now, now you have a timeline that doesn't make any fucking sense, because if you, because, to remind you guys, Avengers Doomsday, right now is not a multiverse movie. If it was, if they were doing a multiverse storyline, I would be like, okay, yeah, they're gonna, they're, well, actually, no, I take that back, because the multiverse has been a fucking mess ever since they decided to get into it. So, so they're, to remind, anybody here, um, I did a video, I think I did a video, I think it might have been, I did a video, a couple years ago, talking about, in fact, no, I think it might have been actually my very first video that I did. I talked about how Marvel jumped straight into the multiverse concept without even literally talking about and establishing like what the rules are, for the multiverse. And in doing something like this, uh in doing something like this, it just shows you that they don't have a fucking clue what they're doing. And it really, they're just so desperate to save, this sinking Titanic, uh of a franchise, that they're just literally going with, like the first thing on their minds, or the first thing, or or you know literally the first thing that they can just pull out of their ass. Yeah, because that's obviously where they're getting their ideas from these days. And but it none of this, none of the, to me, it's just, none of this was thought out. It's, um none of this is thought out. None of this was thought out. None of this was planned. You know, uh Kevin Feige, Kevin Fucky, as I like to call him here on the channel, um, obviously can say, whatever he wants, and that he can say, oh, like there's a plan, and, and all this, and all this other bullshit. But it's like, no, there's not. He can say whatever he wants. He can try to reassure people all he wants, but but people like myself who follow this stuff very, very closely, uh who take the time, to research the stuff and Google it, and watch or read, whatever, what other, whatever videos or reports, or anything that comes out. Anybody, with anybody, anybody, with any common sense or a brain out there, knows, knows that, none of this is, in the end, none of this is going to amount to anything. It's not. And you don't even have, like like your more popular characters in there. Like I said, like Tom Holland's not in it, Mark Ruffalo's not in it. Um, you know, um, um, all the characters that uh, all the characters that appeal, to kids, to uh, the characters that, that have been there since the beginning, that kids uh that kids love, Spider-Man especially. Um and it just, none of this is gonna, it's not, and it's so ridiculous and dumb that I, it's just, it's so ridiculous and dumb that I can't even, I can't even begin to I mean, the fact that I'm even struggling to, to find something to say right now should tell you. Um, but that I also heard that remember, Doomsday is being directed, by the Russo brothers. Um, I also heard a report that and if this and if by some miracle, if it's not Robert Downey that doesn't kill Avengers Doomsday, it'll definitely be this. um I heard a report that Fucky is very, very worried about how this movie um is going to turn out, because of the Russo brothers doing it. Now, let me elaborate. Um, they just came out with a movie on Netflix called The Electric State, which, from what I understand, is not good at all. Um, go look at the reviews. Go look at the Rotten Tomato score. Um, he is apparently very, very, because that movie bombed, or because that movie, was a flop in terms of, the reviews. Um, because obviously, with Netflix, the viewership numbers are obviously, what count. But um but he is supposedly very, very worried about them doing this movie. So, quote unquote, from what I understand, he's going to be, from what I understand, if this report is true, he is basically going to play fucking babysitter to the Russo brothers, and very, very heavily oversee the movie. This would be this would be um this would be the biggest fucking mistake in uh, that Marvel has made, that Marvel has made in quite a while. Um because and I know I talked a little bit about this in my review for Captain America: Brave New World, but Fucky is somebody who has Fucky is someone who has built his career. Uh, Fucky is someone who built his career by surrounding himself with people who are a hell of a lot more creative and talented than he is, and then over the years built up an ego over it, thinking that he was the man and it was all him, when in reality, obviously, it wasn't. And for example, the Marvels, which Marvel lost through 375 million on. Um, the director of that movie, I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but from what I understand, she had very, very little involvement with the movie. Now, some of you are probably going to say, "Oh, well, how is that possible? How is the director, uh, you know, barely involved with, their own movie and yada yada yada?" Well, here's the thing. Studio interference is very common among movies. It has happened more times than I care to count. And superhero movies are usually um obviously, I'm not saying this happens with every single superhero movie, because it obviously doesn't, but the majority of um the DC movies, um studio interference is very, very common with movies, especially comic book movies. And from what I understand, the director of the Marvels, again, I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but according to her, she described the Marvels as a Kevin Feige movie. And that alone should tell you, and Feige and uh his idiocy and stupidity, he's all about the fucking jokes every 5 minutes. He's all about um that he's all about that fucking goofy ass, uh that goofy ass, stupid humor, that makes it feel like an episode of Teletubbies. And for example, Thor: Love and Thunder felt very much like an episode of Teletubbies. Um, and and we've seen before what happens when this idiot gets involved, and interferes with directors' visions. Fucky is like James Gunn. He only works with people who kiss his ass. And you know, and and this moron has has obviously surrounded, and this moron obviously intentionally surrounds himself with yes people, people who kiss his ass, and who uh and who will agree with him no matter what, even if it's a completely shitty idea, regardless regardless of how stupid the idea is. They will say, they will say yes, because those are the type of people that he that he works with. But I mean, not even putting Deadpool in uh in Doomsday, I mean, Deadpool, interacting with, the Fantastic Four, um, interacting with, interacting with, Black Widow, him, like breaking the fourth wall throughout and just, um, and just making, like all these jokes, referencing, the other movies and all that other stuff. Like that would be, I mean, like that alone would be more than enough to make me go see this movie. Even if the movie sucked, he would at least, that would at least be, um, there would at least be, some excitement in it for me there. But obviously that's not what's happening. Um, you're just, all the characters that could have made, you know, all, all the characters, that could have gotten me excited about this movie, that could have, um, that could have possibly, that could have possibly, um, saved, this movie for me. Marvel and Disney just completely, just waved all of it away. It's just, I, I just, I, like as of right now, like I literally don't give a single shit about, all these characters, interacting with one another in this movie. I don't care. I, again, I come back, for a project here and there, uh, when Marvel, when Marvel and Disney, don't have their head up their asses, which again, is pretty rare these days. Um, and there's a lot riding obviously on, um, Fantastic Four. That's obviously going to be, um, a lot is riding on that movie because fans have obviously been screaming for, Marvel Studios interpretation of, Fantastic Four for quite a while now, uh, literally for years. But yeah, no, I'm just, yeah, no, this, this alone is not going to, um, this alone is not, I really, really don't think this is gonna win people over. It's not. I mean, anybody, especially, them bringing back, the original X-Men actors when they're, excuse me, when again, when they, again, I, again, when they already, when they've obviously, long, aged out of those roles. I mean, you're bringing back, um, I mean, you're bringing back, you know, uh, Ian McKellen as, Magneto. I mean, why? I mean, I mean, it's like if you're gonna, it's like if you're gonna bring, these characters back, cast somebody, who hasn't aged out of these roles. At least try to keep the timeline at least, a little consistent. I mean, but no, again, that's too much to ask for. I just, I would be a little bit more forgiving towards it if they brought in, Michael Fassbender as, Magneto. But but I mean, it's like even that, I mean, like even doing that, it still wouldn't have made sense in a way because obviously that's, Um, even that in a way still wouldn't have made sense because that's still, uh, the Fox, universe, and they didn't, and um, those actors, those actors didn't cross over with, the MCU. Um, yeah, like like James McAvoy's, Patrick Stewart, Michael Fassbender's Magneto, none of them were brought into the MCU. Um, Patrick Stewart. I mean, I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, it's like, he was in Multiverse of Madness, but it's like at his age, it's like, what is he gonna do in the movie? I mean, it's like, I mean, like, what are you gonna have him do? I mean, it, Channing Tatum's Gambit, I can understand, but again, you very easily, it's like if you wanted to bring the X-Men in so badly, you just could have, you could have brought back, Hugh Jackman as Wolverine and then just cast or, just brought back, some of the actors in the other movies who are, at least a little bit, uh, who are, again, who haven't completely aged out of those roles yet, or, who you might be, or, you might have been able to, um, you might have been able to maybe, play with a few things here and there and make it work. But it, 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 it just, it doesn't make any sense at all for this to happen. And it doesn't make any sense at all for this to happen. I mean, all the characters that they could have used, uh, all the characters that they could have used, I mean, Blade, Daredevil, um, X-23, um, X-23, some of these other actors who, uh, some of these, Luke Cage, you could have brought back, Mike Coulter, and you could have had him as Luke Cage in this movie. I mean, it's like, why are you bringing back actors who have already aged out of these roles and not using, instead of bringing back, some of these other characters that fans have actually missed, have actually missed and would actually appreciate seeing in this movie. You know, like, like if you took out, um, like if you took out, um, like if you took out, like take out Red Guardian, replace him with, Mike Coulter's Luke Cage, right? Take out, um, take out, Ghost, replace her with, Kristen Ritter as, Jessica Jones. Take out, um, take out, take out Kelsey Grammer's Beast, put in Daredevil, take out, um, Cyclops, put in, or, no, take out, um, yeah, take out Falcon, put in, um, take out Falcon, put in Daredevil, um, take out, um, take out, Shang-Chi, put in, um, put in, Iron Fist, maybe recast Iron Fist, stuff like this, this again, this is not rocket science. It's not. I'm, and I just, I just, it completely blows my mind, the bullshit that that they're putting in this movie. I mean, I get that they're out of ideas and that they're desperate, but it's like if you're so desperate, but it's like if you're so desperate, then make an effort. It's like, it's like, make me want to come back to this franchise, make me want to give a shit again, and they're not doing that. I I don't get it. And and again, Avengers, Infinity War and Endgame were two parts. You're going to try to cram, all this shit into, into a 2 hour, 2.5 hour movie. I mean, seriously, like seriously, like there's no logic in this. And this is what I've been saying all along, is that there is no plan. Secret Wars, that should be a two-parter. You can there's no way in hell that you can cram, a storyline like that, into a 2 hour, 2.5 hour movie. And that should be a two-parter, because then at the end of the day, when you try, to cram, so much shit into into one movie, it just feels it just feels rushed, and it just feels rushed, and it just feels crammed. This is why the Thanos, you know, this is why, the showdown with Thanos was a two-parter, because they knew they needed more room to spread out. They knew that they couldn't tell this story in one movie. I, why they're under the impression now that they can do it now and make it work is beyond me. I but yeah, it just, it doesn't make any sense at all for this stuff to happen, and I'm so fucking sick of it. I'm so fucking tired of it, that I've been tired of it now for the past 5 years. Um Literally the only reason why I pay attention to this stuff is, obviously, is just to be in the know. Is just to it is, is only just so I know, like what's going on, and what uh and I it's just so I know, like what's going on, and what, and whether or not I should go see it. um I can tell you right now, I'm I can tell you right now, I am not wasting my money on this movie. My wallet is closed as of, you know, in terms of Marvel for 2026. I'm not supporting this at all. Um and I'm not gonna give someone, uh I'm not going to give someone, my money, when they don't deserve it. And again, all the bullshit that Marvel and Disney have been pulling for the past 5 years now, and all the bridges that they burned, uh with all these different, with all these different creators, and all these different, uh all these different directors, and and everything else. I'm just like, yeah, you guys can go fuck yourselves. um but yeah, I'm just, yeah, no, I'm done. um just, anything that would get me excited about this movie is not happening. And again, I'm not going to support this in any way, shape, or form. um but yeah, no, let me know what you guys think. Let me know how you feel about the cast, how you feel about, Marvel these days, how you feel about, you know, the movie, and, what's going on with it. Like, subscribe, and I will talk to you guys later. Peace.